From as far back as Ethan Carter could remember, birthdays in his house were strange days. Not sad exactly, just empty. They came and went like any other date on the calendar, unnoticed and uncelebrated. When he was very young, Ethan used to wake up early on his birthday, sitting on the edge of his bed, waiting for someone to call his name. Waiting for the sound of excitement in the kitchen. Waiting for proof that the day meant something. Most years, nothing happened. His parents weren't cruel. They fed him, clothed him, sent him to school. From the outside, they looked like a normal middle-class family. But inside the house, emotions were rationed carefully. Praise was rare. Affection was conditional. And attention was something you earned, not something you were given. When Ethan turned 7, he reminded his mother in the morning that it was his birthday. She paused, surprised, then smiled awkwardly and said, "Oh, right. We'll do something later." Later never came. That night, Ethan ate dinner quietly while his parents talked about bills and work stress. No cake. No candle. No song. At 8, he didn't remind them. By 10, he had learned a painful lesson. Expecting nothing hurt less than hoping. Ethan watched how his parents behaved with others. At family gatherings, they were warm and smiling. They praised cousins, complimented neighbors' children, bragged politely about how busy life was. But behind closed doors, silence ruled. If Ethan brought home a good grade, the response was a distracted nod. If he failed, the disappointment was loud and sharp. "You need to be more like other kids," his father would say. "You're too quiet," his mother added. "No one notices people like that." Those words stayed with him. Birthdays became reminders of where he stood, not important enough to stop life for, not valuable enough to celebrate. Each forgotten birthday stacked quietly on his chest like invisible weight. Ethan stopped asking for toys. Stopped asking for outings. Stopped asking questions. Instead, he observed. He noticed how approval appeared only when something looked good to outsiders. How success mattered more than effort. How emotions were inconvenient unless they served an image. Slowly, without realizing it, Ethan adapted. He became low maintenance. Invisible. Easy to ignore. Teachers called him mature for his age. Relatives called him well-behaved. But no one asked how a child learns to disappear inside his own home. By his teenage years, Ethan no longer associated birthdays with joy. They were just quiet checkpoints, reminders that he was on his own emotionally, even while living under his parents' roof. And somewhere deep inside, a seed was planted. If no one was going to show him his worth, he would have to prove it to himself. That quiet resolve, born from neglect, shaped by silence, would one day change everything. As Ethan grew older, he learned that silence was safer than speaking. In his house, words could easily turn into criticism, and questions often ended with irritation. So he trained himself to listen instead. To observe moods. To disappear when voices grew sharp. High school was where this habit fully settled into him. Every morning, Ethan left the house without a goodbye. Not because he was angry, but because no one noticed whether he said it or not. His parents were always busy, his father buried in work calls, his mother rushing through chores while scrolling on her phone. Ethan's presence didn't interrupt their routine, and over time, he stopped trying to interrupt it himself. At school, teachers saw him as the quiet achiever. He never caused trouble. Never asked for extra help. Never complained. When group projects were assigned, he did most of the work and let others take the credit. Praise didn't excite him anymore. It felt temporary, unreliable. What hurt most wasn't the absence of gifts or parties. It was the absence of curiosity. No one asked how his day went. No one asked what he liked. No one asked what he dreamed about. On his 16th birthday, Ethan came home to find his parents arguing about finances. He stood in the doorway for a moment, holding his school bag, wondering if he should say something. He decided not to. He went to his room, closed the door, and spent the evening studying. Not because he had to, but because books didn't ignore him. That night, he promised himself something quietly, almost fearfully. One day, I'll build a life so loud they won't be able to ignore it. From that moment on, Ethan poured himself into one thing: independence. He worked part-time jobs after school, saved every possible dollar, and learned skills most teenagers didn't care about. While others were partying, he was watching videos about investing, business models, and self-growth. Not because he wanted to be rich, but because he never wanted to feel small again. College applications came and went. His parents barely noticed where he applied, only asking practical questions about fees and distance. When he got accepted into a good university with partial scholarship, there was no celebration. Just a simple, "That's fine." But Ethan didn't need their approval anymore. Inside him, something had hardened, not into bitterness, but into determination. He had stopped expecting warmth from the place that never offered it. Instead, he began building his own sense of worth, brick by brick, quietly. He didn't know it yet, but the loneliness that shaped him was also preparing him. Preparing him for success that would shock the very people who had overlooked him his entire life. And the biggest shock of all would come on a birthday they forgot once again. Ethan woke up early that morning with a strange heaviness in his chest. He didn't need to check the date, he already knew. It was his birthday. His 24th. He lay in bed for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the house. His mother moving around the kitchen. His father talking loudly on the phone about work. Life going on, unchanged. No knock on the door. No happy birthday. No smile. Ethan got up, got dressed, and walked into the kitchen. His mother barely glanced at him. "Morning," she said, distracted. "Morning," Ethan replied. That was it. His father walked past him, grabbed his coffee, and headed for the door. "I'll be late tonight," his father said, already halfway out. Ethan nodded. No one remembered. Again. At this point, it didn't surprise him, but it still hurt. There was a dull ache, not sharp anymore, just tired. Like a wound that never healed but stopped bleeding. Ethan left the house quietly. He didn't correct them. He didn't remind them. He had learned long ago that reminding people of your importance only proves how little they value it. Instead, he drove. Out of the city. Onto open roads. Wind rushing past the windows. Music playing loud, louder than his thoughts. This was how he celebrated now, alone, free, unanswered. By afternoon, his phone buzzed. A message from his mother. "Can you pick up groceries on your way back?" Ethan stared at the screen for a long moment, then locked his phone and tossed it onto the passenger seat. That night, he didn't come home for dinner. He went to a small restaurant by himself, ordered his favorite meal, and quietly asked the waiter to bring a candle with dessert. When the candle was lit, Ethan smiled, a sad smile, and blew it out alone. "This is fine," he whispered to himself. "I'm used to this." But something inside him shifted. That was the night he decided. This will be the last birthday I spend feeling invisible. Over the next year, Ethan's life began to change rapidly. The side projects he had been working on quietly started paying off. An online business he built late at night began generating serious income. He reinvested everything, lived simply, and told no one, not friends, not family. Especially not family. By the time his next birthday approached, Ethan had accomplished something none of them expected. Something shiny. Something loud. Something impossible to ignore. And when his parents finally noticed him again, it wouldn't be because of a cake. It would be because of a $95,000 Porsche parked in their driveway. Ethan pulled into the driveway slowly. The engine purred, deep, smooth, powerful. The kind of sound that makes people turn their heads without realizing why. The glossy black Porsche reflected the afternoon sun like a mirror, flawless and unapologetic. He turned off the engine. For a second, everything was quiet. Then the front door flew open. His mother stepped out first, her grocery bag slipping from her hands. Oranges rolled across the driveway, but she didn't notice. Her eyes were locked on the car. "What is that?" she whispered. Ethan stepped out calmly, adjusted his jacket, and leaned casually against the door like this was just another Tuesday. "It's my car," he said. His father came rushing out next, disbelief written all over his face. "Whose car is this?" he demanded. "Did you borrow it?" Ethan smiled, not smug, not proud, just calm. No. I bought it. Silence. You could practically hear their thoughts scrambling. With what money? His father snapped. Ethan reached into his pocket, pulled out the keys, and gently tossed them in the air once before catching them. Mine. His mother walked closer, touching the hood as if it might disappear. Ethan, this isn't funny. These cars cost more than houses. Yeah, Ethan replied. About $95,000. That's when panic entered their faces. His father's voice softened instantly. Too instantly. Son, why didn't you tell us you were doing this well? Ethan looked at him carefully. You never asked. That hit harder than yelling ever could. His mother laughed nervously. We thought you were still, figuring things out. Ethan nodded. I was. Alone. They stood there awkwardly, suddenly unsure how to talk to the son they had ignored for years. Then his mother said it, the sentence Ethan had heard his entire life. We just worry about you. Ethan met her eyes. Funny. You didn't worry on my birthdays. Her smile froze. His father cleared his throat. Let's go inside. We should talk. Ethan followed them in, not because he needed answers anymore, but because he wanted to see how quickly attention changes when success shows up wearing leather seats and horsepower. Inside the house, they sat like strangers. His mother poured tea. His father leaned forward, elbows on knees. So, what exactly do you do? His father asked. Ethan leaned back. I build things people don't believe in, until they work. For the first time in his life, his parents were listening. Really listening. But Ethan already knew something they didn't. Their sudden interest wasn't love. It was fear. Fear of losing access. Fear of missing out. Fear that the son they ignored no longer needed them. And that realization, that was more powerful than the Porsche itself. Dinner that night felt strange. Ethan sat at the table where he had blown out birthday candles alone for years, except this time, his parents wouldn't stop looking at him. His mother kept smiling too much. His father kept nodding like everything Ethan said was important. So, are you living comfortably? His mother asked softly. Ethan paused before answering. Yeah, I am. His father leaned back. That's good. Very good. A man should be settled. Ethan noticed it immediately, the shift. They weren't curious about him. They were curious about his lifestyle. His mother brought dessert, something she hadn't done on his birthday in 3 years. I made your favorite, she said. Ethan stared at the plate. You don't even remember what my favorite is. Silence. His mother's hand trembled slightly as she set the dish down. Oh, right, she laughed nervously. Things slip my mind. Ethan didn't touch the dessert. His father cleared his throat. So, Ethan, that car. You didn't take a loan, did you? No, Ethan replied. Another pause. With cash? His father asked. Yes. That's when his father's eyes changed. Not pride. Calculation. You know, his father said slowly. We've been thinking of renovating the house. It's getting old. Ethan nodded. It is. And your mother's medical bills, his father continued. They add up. Ethan looked up. I thought you said insurance covered it. His father avoided eye contact. Well, not everything. There it was. The moment Ethan had prepared for but still hated. His mother reached across the table and held Ethan's hand. We're family, she said. We support each other. Ethan gently pulled his hand back. Support goes both ways, he replied quietly. His mother blinked. What do you mean? Ethan stood up. I mean you forgot my birthday again last month. Didn't call. Didn't text. Didn't even realize until today. His father frowned. That's not fair. We were busy. Ethan laughed, short, tired. You were always busy. The room felt heavier with every word. So let me be clear, Ethan said calmly. I didn't buy this car to impress you. I bought it because I survived without you. His mother's eyes filled with tears. Ethan, don't say that. But it's true, he said. And now suddenly, I matter. His father stood up too. We raised you. Ethan met his gaze. You housed me. That's not the same. That sentence landed hard. For the first time, his parents realized something terrifying. They didn't have the right to ask for anything. Not money. Not help. Not forgiveness. Because Ethan wasn't angry anymore. He was independent. And independence is what scares neglectful people the most. The next morning, Ethan woke up to the sound of plates clinking in the kitchen. That alone felt unreal. His mother was cooking breakfast. Real breakfast. Eggs, toast, tea, the kind she used to make years ago, back when she still noticed him. Good morning, she said sweetly when she saw him. Sit, I made this for you. Ethan hesitated, then Saturday. His father joined them, already dressed, unusually cheerful. So, his father began, buttering toast, we were talking last night. Ethan stayed silent. He had learned that silence made people reveal more. His mother sighed dramatically. We may not have been perfect parents, but we tried. Tried. That word always showed up when people wanted forgiveness without accountability. You know, his father continued, families don't keep score. What matters is unity. Ethan looked up. Funny. You kept score when I needed help. His mother's smile faded for a second, then returned stronger. We were under pressure, she said. Responsibilities. Stress. You'll understand when you're older. Ethan pushed his plate away. I'm old enough to understand now. His father leaned forward. Then you'll also understand that success comes with responsibility. There it was. Ethan nodded slowly. Responsibility to whom? To family, his mother said quickly. Ethan stood up and walked to the window. Outside, his Porsche gleamed in the sunlight. You didn't feel responsible when I paid my own college fees, he said. Or when I worked 2 jobs. Or when you forgot my birthday, again. His mother's voice cracked. We said we're sorry. No, Ethan replied calmly. You said you were busy. That hit harder than shouting ever could. His father's tone changed, sharper now. Don't be dramatic. We gave you life. And I built everything else myself, Ethan answered. Silence swallowed the room. His mother wiped her eyes. If you loved us, you'd help us. Ethan turned around. If you loved me, he said quietly, you wouldn't need my money to remember me. That sentence broke something. His father slammed his hand on the table. So what? You'll just abandon us now that you're rich. Ethan didn't raise his voice. No, he said. I'll just stop pretending neglect was love. He grabbed his keys. His mother rushed forward. Where are you going? For a drive, Ethan replied. Alone. As he stepped outside, his father called after him. Don't forget where you came from. Ethan paused, hand on the car door. I didn't, he said. That's why I won't go back to it. The engine roared to life. And for the first time, his parents felt it. They were losing him, not because he hated them, but because he no longer needed their approval. I didn't drive far. I couldn't. My hands were tight on the steering wheel, knuckles white, as the Porsche glided through streets I barely noticed. The city lights blurred into long streaks of gold and red, but my mind wasn't on the road, it was stuck in the living room I'd just left behind. Ignored. Again. On my birthday. Again. The engine's low, controlled growl was the only thing grounding me. This car, it wasn't about luxury. It wasn't about flexing. It was the first thing in my life that proved I didn't need their approval to survive. My phone started vibrating on the seat beside me. Once. Twice. Again. Mom. Dad. Mom again. I didn't answer. Not because I was angry, but because for the first time, I wanted to hear what silence sounded like from their side. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, replaying my entire childhood like an unwanted movie. Birthdays forgotten. School events unattended. Achievements brushed aside like dust. Next time, they always said. But next time never came. When I finally pulled back into the driveway, something felt off. Lights were on. Too many lights. Voices echoed from inside the house. I stepped out of the Porsche, shut the door slowly, and walked toward the front entrance. With every step, my chest felt heavier, like I was walking into something I didn't agree to. I opened the door. And froze. The living room was full. My uncle sat on the couch. Two of my aunts were whispering near the window. Even the neighbor, who once asked me if I still lived here, was standing awkwardly near the bookshelf. Every conversation stopped at once. All eyes turned to me. My mother rushed forward immediately, her face painted with concern she hadn't worn in years. "There you are. We were so worried," she said, gripping my arm tightly. Worried. That word hit me harder than any insult ever could. I gently pulled my arm free. "What's going on?" My father cleared his throat, standing straight like he was about to address a boardroom. "We're having a family discussion." A discussion. Without me. I scanned the room slowly. Every chair was occupied. It looked less like a discussion and more like a courtroom, except I was the only one on trial. This couldn't wait. I asked calmly. My aunt forced a smile. "Your parents were just telling us how well you're doing these days." Ah. So this wasn't about my birthday. This was about the car. My uncle chuckled nervously. "A Porsche at your age. That's impressive." I didn't smile. "You didn't invite me here to admire my car." The room grew tense. My mother clasped her hands together, eyes already glossy. "There's been a misunderstanding," she said softly. "A misunderstanding that lasted my entire life." My father sighed loudly. "Ethan feels neglected." Feels. Like it was an emotion I invented. "I was neglected," I said quietly. The silence that followed was suffocating. My mother's eyes widened. "Ethan, don't exaggerate." Exaggerate. That word snapped something inside me. I turned slowly, facing everyone. "Who here remembers my last birthday?" No one answered. Not a single voice. Who knew I worked night shifts at 19 just to pay my own fees? Silence. Who knew I skipped meals so I wouldn't ask my parents for money? Still nothing. The room shifted uncomfortably. My father raised his voice. "This is not the place for accusations." "Then why invite witnesses?" I asked, meeting his eyes. My uncle leaned forward, trying to sound wise. "Parents make mistakes, son." "Mistakes are accidental," I replied. "Patterns are choices." That landed hard. I saw it on their faces. Recognition. Shame. Fear. My mother suddenly broke into loud sobs, covering her face. "I carried you for 9 months, she cried. "Is this how you repay me?" All eyes turned toward me, waiting, expecting me to apologize. Instead, I spoke softly, because shouting wasn't needed anymore. "I didn't ask to be born," I said. "I asked to be loved." The neighbor coughed. One aunt looked down. Another wiped her eyes. My father stood up abruptly. "Enough. You're embarrassing us." I laughed, just once. Short. Bitter. "No," I said calmly. "You're embarrassed because they can finally see it." I grabbed my jacket. My mother rushed after me. "You're tearing this family apart." I stopped at the door but didn't turn around. "I didn't tear it apart," I said. "I just stopped holding it together alone." I walked out. Behind me, whispers erupted. Outside, the night air felt cold and honest. I sat inside the Porsche, hands shaking, not from anger, but from release. For years, I thought being ignored was normal. Tonight, everyone else finally saw it wasn't. And that terrified my parents more than my success ever could. By the next morning, the building felt different. Quieter. Sharper. Like it was holding its breath. Mark Henson didn't come back alone. He came with lawyers. 3 of them. Black suits. Cold eyes. The kind of people who think intimidation is a language everyone understands. They walked into the lobby like they owned the place. And stopped the moment the access gates didn't open. The receptionist didn't even look up. Visitors need clearance, she said calmly. Mark slammed his hand on the desk. Do you know who I am? She smiled politely. Yes. You're the former tenant on floor 17. Former. That word hit him harder than any punch. 10 minutes later, they were sitting across from me in the conference room. Glass walls. Soft lighting. Security cameras blinking quietly in every corner. Mark's lawyer spoke first. We're here to discuss an unlawful lockout, he said, sliding papers across the table. My client's business operations were sabotaged without due process. I didn't touch the papers. I folded my hands instead. Sabotaged? I asked softly. Interesting choice of word. Mark leaned forward, anger barely contained. You humiliated me. You cut power, access, everything, without warning. I tilted my head. Without warning. I tapped my tablet once. The wall screen lit up. Email timestamps. Security reports. Written complaints. One after another. Warnings he ignored. Emails he mocked. Signed acknowledgements he never read. His lawyers shifted slightly. Then I tapped again. The room went silent. Security footage began to play. Mark shouting at a cleaner. Mark blocking emergency exits. Mark threatening a security guard. And then, the clip that changed everything. Mark on the phone in the hallway, laughing. Yeah, I don't care what the contract says. She won't do anything. People like her never do. The lawyer swallowed. Mark stood up. That footage is illegal. No, I replied calmly. It's from common areas. Fully disclosed. Fully legal. I leaned forward now. You see, this building doesn't just rent space. It records behavior. I changed the clip. Another video. Mark pounding on a server room door after hours. Trying to force entry. Cursing when it wouldn't open. I paused it. That, I said quietly, is a felony attempt. The room shifted. The confidence drained from their faces. One of the lawyers cleared his throat. We weren't aware of these incidents. I know, I said. Because your client never tells the truth. Mark finally snapped. You're enjoying this, he shouted. You planned this. I didn't deny it. I prepared for it, I corrected. There's a difference. I stood up and walked to the glass wall. This building runs on compliance, respect, and contracts. I turned back to them. You violated all three. I tapped my tablet one last time. The screen displayed clause 14 in bold. Immediate restriction of access. No appeal. No refund. One of the lawyers closed his folder slowly. Mr. Henson, he said carefully, I suggest we step outside. Mark looked at him in disbelief. You're supposed to fight this. The lawyer didn't meet his eyes. There's nothing to fight. Mark's voice dropped. You're abandoning me. No, the lawyer replied. You abandoned yourself. They left shortly after. Mark stayed behind for a moment. He looked smaller now. Not angry. Not loud. Just scared. You ruined me, he said quietly. I met his eyes. No, I said. You did. He walked out without another word. And for the first time since this started, the building exhaled. But the story wasn't over. Because power doesn't end with silence. It ends with understanding. The boardroom felt colder than usual that day. Not because of the air conditioning, but because of the tension sitting heavy in the room. Floor-to-ceiling glass surrounded us, reflecting faces that were trained to hide emotions. Investors, lawyers, senior executives, all calm on the surface, all curious underneath. This was the kind of room where decisions were made quietly, but their impact echoed loudly. Mark was sitting at the far end of the table. For the first time since I had met him, he didn't look confident. His posture was stiff, his jaw clenched, his fingers tapping nervously against the polished wood. The man who once laughed at rules now looked like someone waiting for a verdict. I sat calmly at the head of the table, a tablet resting in front of me. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry either. I had already moved past emotions. What remained was clarity. The chairman cleared his throat and officially opened the meeting. He spoke carefully, choosing his words like a surgeon. The purpose, he said, was to understand the sudden revocation of access to floor 17 and the operational shutdown that followed. He called it an unexpected disruption. Mark didn't wait for permission to speak. This was a targeted move, he said loudly. My company was sabotaged. Systems were shut down overnight. We lost clients, credibility, everything. And it happened without warning. As he spoke, his eyes kept flicking toward me, as if daring me to react. I didn't. I let him talk. People always revealed more when they believed they were still in control. When he finally stopped, the room went quiet. All eyes shifted toward me. I turned on the tablet. The first screen lit up with a clean, simple timeline. Dates. Times. Incident reports. No opinions. Just facts. I began speaking, slowly and evenly, explaining that warnings had been issued multiple times. Formal notices. Automated alerts. Direct emails. All acknowledged. All ignored. As I moved through each incident, verbal abuse toward staff, blocked emergency exits, unauthorized access attempts, I could feel the atmosphere changing. A few people leaned forward. Someone frowned. Someone else adjusted their glasses and looked closer at the screen. Mark shifted in his chair. Then the emails appeared. His words. His tone. His arrogance. Sentences filled the screen, dismissive, condescending, confident to the point of carelessness. One message in particular caught the room's attention. A few people exchanged glances. Someone let out a quiet breath. I played the audio next. Mark's voice echoed through the boardroom, laughing, casual, certain. He said my name like it didn't matter. He said I wouldn't do anything. The silence afterward was sharp. The chairman asked a simple question. Who was he referring to? I answered calmly. Me. Mark opened his mouth, then closed it again. I moved on, pulling up the lease agreement. The clause was highlighted clearly. Immediate access restriction in the event of serious violations. No ambiguity. No loopholes. I explained that the building wasn't just a physical space. It was an integrated system. Every door, every elevator, every server room depended on compliance. The system didn't respond to excuses or ego. It responded to breaches. Mark suddenly slammed his hand on the table and accused me of selective enforcement. I looked at him directly for the first time and told him it wasn't selective. It was delayed. The rules had always been there. He had simply chosen to ignore them. Then came the footage. Security recordings played silently on the screen. His office late at night. Staff slumped over desks. An intern standing alone in a hallway, wiping tears from their face. Raised voices. Pointing fingers. Fear that didn't belong in a workplace. A quiet question came from one side of the table. Was this legal? I answered honestly. No. Mark stood up, his face flushed, trying to regain control by raising his voice. Before he could finish his sentence, I told him to sit down. He did. Not because I forced him, but because the room had already decided who held authority. I walked slowly along the length of the table as I spoke. I told them he had mistaken speed for entitlement. That he believed growth excused behavior. That he thought power came from volume and intimidation. I stopped behind his chair and said something that felt heavier than anything else that day. Power doesn't shout. Power enforces boundaries. The final slide appeared. A security log. Time-stamped. Highlighted in red. A server room breach attempt at 2:17 a.m. I let that sit in the air. I explained that this wasn't a landlord-tenant issue anymore. It was a security risk. And systems were designed to respond to risk without hesitation. Mark's lawyer finally spoke, his voice subdued, acknowledging that defending against this evidence would be difficult. The vote didn't take long. The decision was unanimous. The termination was valid. No compensation. No reinstatement. Mark stood slowly. The sound of his chair scraping against the floor felt louder than it should have. No one stopped him. No one spoke. He walked out without looking back. As the door closed, the tension eased slightly, like a storm passing. The chairman looked at me and said I had handled the situation decisively. I corrected him. I said I handled it correctly. One of the investors lingered after the room began to clear. He said I could have destroyed Mark much earlier. I shook my head. I said that wasn't the point. I didn't want him crushed. I wanted him to understand. Because real consequences aren't about punishment. They're about exposure. And that day, in that boardroom, the truth had nowhere left to hide. When the boardroom finally emptied, I stayed behind for a moment. The glass walls reflected my own image back at me, calm, composed, unchanged. But inside, something had shifted. Not relief. Not victory. Just a quiet sense of completion. I gathered my tablet, turned off the lights, and walked out. The hallway felt longer than usual. Every step echoed softly, reminding me that power doesn't announce itself when it wins. It simply moves on. Outside, the city continued exactly as it always did. Cars moved. People hurried. Businesses lived and died quietly in the background. Mark's collapse didn't stop the world. It never does. That's the cruel part of consequences. They feel massive only to the person facing them. Later that evening, I received the final system report. Floor 17 had been reassigned. New tenants. Clean records. Respectful negotiations. The building breathed easier, as if tension itself had been evicted. Mark tried calling once. I didn't answer. Not because I was angry, but because there was nothing left to say. Everything that needed to be communicated had already been delivered, clearly and legally, inside that boardroom. Over the next few weeks, the ripple effects became visible. His company downsized. Investors pulled out. Articles surfaced, carefully worded but unmistakable. Leadership failures. Internal culture concerns. No one mentioned my name. They didn't need to. Power rarely signs its work. One evening, as I stood by the window of my office, watching the building lights flicker on floor by floor, I thought about how easily this could have gone differently. I could have ignored the early signs. I could have bent rules for convenience. I could have chosen peace over principle. But I didn't. Because boundaries are only real when they're enforced. I remembered the day Mark laughed. The way he dismissed warnings. The way he treated people like obstacles instead of humans. He believed access was entitlement. That space belonged to whoever shouted the loudest. He was wrong. Access is a privilege. Respect is non-negotiable. And power answers only to structure. Weeks later, a junior manager from his former company reached out anonymously. The message was short. "Thank you," it said. "Things are different now. People feel safer." I stared at the message longer than I expected. That was the moment I understood something clearly. This wasn't revenge. This was correction. I didn't take something from him. I simply stopped protecting him from the consequences of his own behavior. And that changed everything. That night, as I locked up and walked out of the building, I glanced back once. The lights glowed steadily, every floor functioning as it should. Order restored. Balance maintained. Some lessons are expensive. Some mistakes echo for years. And some doors, once closed with a single click, are never opened again.